You may consider yourself a person of faith, but do you really know God? The Pew Research Center found that most Americans failed a quiz asking some of the most basic questions about religion, and atheists and agnostics did better than Catholics and evangelicals on that quiz. With us with Washington to talk more about it, Greg Smith. He's a senior researcher with the Pew Research Center's Forum on Religion and Public Life. And Stephen Prothero, he's a religion professor at Boston University. Great to talk to both of you this morning. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having us.
Just as we get into the discussion here, for the folks at home, I wanted to put up some of the questions, and these are some of the more difficult ones people found to answer. First question is, what is the religion of Maimonides? Only 8% of people got this right. We're going to give you the answers in just a couple of minutes. Here's another one that only 27% of people got right. What religion do most people in Indonesia consider themselves to be? And a third question here, according to rulings by the Supreme Court, are public school teachers permitted to read from the Bible as literature? Think about those questions. We'll give you the answers in just a couple of minutes. But Greg, start us out here. What struck you as being the headline here? What was the surprise?
Well, I think the thing that was most striking to me was the strong performance on the survey by atheists and agnostics. Of all of the groups that we looked at, atheists and agnostics are among the top performers, along with Mormons and Jews. They outperformed, as you mentioned, evangelical Christians, Catholics, mainline Protestants, and other groups.
So, Steve, help us out here. Why is that?
Well, atheists and agnostics spend a lot of time fighting with religious people about religion, so they have a need, in the basis of their argument, to learn something about Christianity and about Islam, etc. But I think the other side of it is really that religious people just know very little about their own traditions or the religions of others. This was an argument I made in a book of mine a few years ago called Religious Literacy, where I said Americans are really functionally illiterate when it comes to religion. They don't know much about their own religions, and they don't know much about the religions of other people.
I mean, it really is striking, isn't it, Greg, that the a-religious know more than the religious do, particularly when you consider how religious a nation this is. We're probably the most religious nation in the industrialized world.
Well, that's right. But one thing we should keep in mind is that if we look at the population as a whole, it is true that people with the highest levels of religious commitment, those people who say they attend religious services regularly and that religion is very important in their lives, those people actually do a little bit better on the survey than people who are less religious. It's just that you have this small group, atheists and agnostics, who are both they really aren't particularly religious, and they do quite well on the survey.
Okay, that said, let's go now back to our questions, because people have been mulling them over for the last couple of minutes, and we'll give you the answer. The answer to the first question, what is the religion of Maimonides? Of course, many people in New York will know Maimonides is the namesake for a hospital here. He was also a Jewish philosopher and rabbi in medieval times, so he was Jewish. Here's the answer to the second question. What religion do most people in Indonesia consider themselves to be? The answer to that question, Muslim, because Indonesia is the most populous Muslim nation in the world. And the third question, according to rulings by the Supreme Court, are public school teachers permitted to read from the Bible as literature? The answer to that question is yes. Stephen, are most people, because they didn't do well on this quiz, is that a suggestion that most people are taking faith on faith?
Yeah, I think I want to add, before I answer that, I want to add quickly that those are relatively difficult questions, but there's a lot of really easy questions on this quiz. For example, we didn't ask, is the Pope Catholic, but we came pretty close when we asked, is the Dalai Lama Buddhist? And most Americans don't get that question right.
Wow.
So I think in terms of faith and knowledge here, I think we have a gap, clearly, between faith and knowledge. And what's going on is that American religion, particularly on the Christianity side, has gravitated toward this evangelical religion of the heart, where it's really all about feeling and loving Jesus and having a relationship with him rather than knowing something about the tradition. I think that's one piece of it. And another is that we're doing a really poor job in our public schools and of teaching kids about the religions of the world.
Do you think that's correct, Greg, that you don't need to know Jesus to love him?
Well, I certainly can't speak to whether or not it's correct that knowing about these things is a prerequisite for having strong faith. We know that the United States is a very religious country. It's a nation of believers. But as the survey shows, it's also true that there are major elements of religion, major elements of people's own faiths that they're not aware of. There's no question about that.
Stephen, one other point we should make here is that there wasn't enough of a Muslim sample to make it into the poll, but what you did find was talking to other folks, atheist, agnostic, Jewish, Mormon, Protestant, and Catholic, that there was a real knowledge gap about Islam.
Right. I mean, we found that only about half of Americans can name that the Quran is the holy book of Islam. Only about half know that Ramadan is the Muslim holy month. And so we just spent about a month having this conversation in America about this burning of the Quran. Mm-hmm. And what we know based on the survey is about half of Americans are sort of scratching their heads and wondering, well, you know, what's the Quran? Is it a novel or something somebody wrote in the Middle East? I mean, they don't even necessarily know what it is. It's hard to have a national conversation about Islam when we have such a knowledge deficit when it comes to the Muslim tradition.
Well, it's just a fascinating study and well worth reading through. Steve Prothero, Greg Smith, thanks so much for being with us. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
If you want to test your knowledge, by the way, about religion, take the interactive quiz at CNN's Belief blog. That's at cnn.com/belief, and see how much you know about religion.